Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Tradie Business School podcast, the only podcast you need to build a sustainable business, setting yourself free from the tools at some stage. I'm joined with my partner in crime today, Brian Santos. G'day, Brian. How are you today?
G'day, Adam. Good to see you. Good to be here.
It's good to see you too, mates. We've got a topic dear to my heart today, so please excuse me if I get up on my high horse because accountants are the bane of my existence. I have to preface this, our podcast today, with this is not financial advice by any stretch of the imagination. That is not what we're about. We very much try to stay in our lane of giving people help with their business strategies, how to grow and scale their business, how to manage their time, their cash, but not what you should do when it comes to tax time and those sorts of things. Accountants are very good at looking backwards at numbers, and we're very good at looking forwards at the future and taking those numbers and going, okay, how do we make some educated decisions on where we need to go? What do we need to do? How do we drive our decisions off of the data rather than off of the feelings that we often get? But Brian, I want to throw over to you because this come up on the back of, one of our clients having some hard times in and around their accounting. And I'd love to, because this is something that shows up all the time. It's the old accrual versus cash accounting basis. The other thing I want to do before we get into this is I want to say that I know some amazing accountants, but I know some terrible ones too. And what we hope to get you by the end of this podcast is some tips on how to find amazing accountants, and move away from those ones that are not proactive and not worried about your best interests. They're only worried about their own conformance and their own reporting and their own issues. But Brian, please tell us about the client. We won't mention any names, but the experience that they've currently faced, or the situation that they're currently faced, and sort of what, how that come about.
Sure. So, which is something that we often see, right? So this isn't a one-off example. It's something that we see every so often. And which is, I guess, the reason why we're having this discussion today is to kind of educate people on not about accounting, because we're not accountants, but to be aware of what to look for, right? So the situation with a client of ours is that they've been doing really well. They've had growth. It's been fantastic. And then they all of a sudden had some cash flow issues because there was a major bill a tax bill that was due. And the problem was with the growth came, so he was doing some construction projects, and it was a large bills in the tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And he was invoicing it out what would have been like over several months. But because he entered it in as an invoice through his system, I can't remember, ServiceMate or whatever it was, and then it plugged into Xero. And so that whole $80,000, $60,000 was actually invoiced out, even though he knew he was only going to get deposits and progress payments over the next few months. Yet as the BAS came due, it came to be reported, the income that was reported was the $60,000 or $80,000, even though that
lump sum
back in. Exactly.
Yeah.
So he has to pay GST on that 60, 80 grand, which is a chunk of cash, especially if that income, that cash isn't coming in. And so that's what brought up this whole concept of this. This is the sort of stuff that your accountant, in my opinion, should be discussing with you. At the very least, educating you so that you know, or seeing it in advance, right? Or seeing it in your books and saying, hang on, something doesn't match up, right? Yet he's now in the situation where he's speaking to us and saying, I'm stuck a bit. And we're saying, well, what did you do with your accountant? Why didn't they say this? Or why didn't they do that? And so, which is a problem in my opinion, because, and this is something that we discussed, your accountant should be an extended team member of your business, right? And if your team member isn't communicating on the things that are important to their specific role, and it's just an afterthought, and it's, then that's a problem to me. If it's affecting your cash flow, which is really the lifeblood of your business, then to me that's a problem. And so hence the discussion of today.
Definitely. I think one key point to point out here is people probably don't know the difference between cash accounting and accrual accounting. Once again, this is not financial advice. There may be some nuances there that I'm not aware of, but over the years, I've decided to take control of the accounting and understand and learn about accounting and understand what these two, I guess, different ways of accounting are. Because one big thing I see with business owners and I've done it myself is abdication of responsibility to know and understand what the specialists are doing, right? Like just blind faith, I give that to my accountant to do. Now, if you've got a really good accountant, that probably is never going to blow up in your face. But if you've got an accountant that is not that good, then these are the sorts of scenarios that happen. Accountants tend to, or what I've seen a lot of, is they tend to push people towards accrual-based accounting, which is basically anything that you've invoiced, you've got to pay tax on in that quarter, right? Whether you've collected that tax or not. Now, the problem with that accounting method is it's really good for knowing exactly where you are in your tax position, but it smashes your cash flow. Because if you invoice, let's say you've invoiced a $100,000 job, it's got $10,000 GST on it. You've then got to pay that $10,000 GST and you may not have received a cent yet. So that's a really challenging place. You've already just burned through 10 grand that you don't have right now. Now, for small businesses, this can crush a business, really easily. Some small business owners are doing, $5,000 to $10,000 a month. And then when you pay tax on top of that, $500 or $1,000, that can be the difference between them paying their bills or not, or making a loan repayment or not. So I'm not going to say my advice is, my preference for me personally would be to always be on cash-based accrual until such a point, sorry, I've just meddled the words there, always to be on cash-based accounting rather than accrual-based accounting for the sheer fact that I've only got to pay that tax, pay it forward once I've collected it. So therefore I can use like a profit first accounting method. I can get that tax in the door and I can sit it in an account until it's tax time and then pay it forward. Whereas the accrual-based, you've got to basically be bankrolling the tax. Now, sure, if that client defaults and you don't get paid, you get a tax offset or a tax credit in your next BAS. But the thing is, you've then got to wait 3 months for that. So I'm all about keeping as much cash in your pocket and in your door as possible. But I mean, we talked offline a little bit about some of the symptoms of, I guess, not having a good relationship with an accountant. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on those. I know for me, there's always this in the times, and I've been through a few accountants in my time. I'm pretty unrelenting with it now for the pure sake that I know what I need to see and what I need to hear. And we'll get to that later on, is what are the questions that you want to ask your accountant to know that they do have your best interests at heart. For me, it's definitely that uneasy feeling when it comes to dealing with them, if you've got that gut feeling that you don't get a lot of confidence with somebody who plays such a vital role in your business, then you've really got to question whether that's a relationship you want moving forward. I mean, if it was your partner in business or in life and they gave you zero confidence that they've got your back, would you go forward in life with them? The answer's probably not. But I still see people do that because of the old saying, better the devil you know. They continue with the accountant. Oh, they lodge all my, they lodge my things on time once a year. And it's like, no, that's not a good accountant. So, I mean, what in your experience, Brian, what have you sort of seen and heard to know that the accountant's great or not so great?
Yeah, for me, when we see clients and businesses who are doing well or have a good situation or setup with their account, they usually talk about them from a relationship point of view first and foremost. So if you don't feel like you have a great relationship or a relationship full stop with your accountant, then that's that. Not that it's a red flag, but it's something that you should consider. Not that you should expect your accountant to be your best mate or anything like that, but the term that I used before was team member. So if you don't feel like your relationship with your accountant is like having another team member, an extended team member to your business, then that's something that you should consider. Sometimes accountants don't do so, again, this is just my observation. They don't step up.
We're being very diplomatic, aren't we? We're throwing grenades at accountants, but being very diplomatic. It's like throwing a hand grenade wrapped in cotton wool.
Well, yes.
It's still deadly. Still deadly, never mind. Yes.
But the thing is, if you don't ask, this is what I find, if you don't ask your accountant, if you don't say to them or communicate it, so it's while it's an ownership on their side, it's really an ownership on your side too.
100%. Yeah.
So if you don't say to your accountant, this is what I need help with, more often than not, they're busy, right? Accountants, any decent accountant is so busy at the moment. There's more demand than there are good accountants.
Yeah.
So they're going to be busy and they're going to prioritize the ones who they believe need the help and want the help the most. So if you're quiet and you don't communicate to your accountant, guess what? They're going to think, Adam's fine. He's all right. He's sorted, right? And then, but really what you, and I guess hopefully this is one of the things that you get from today, is build that relationship, that communication with your accountant so that you can discuss with them things proactively as opposed to reactively after the fact that, you've got all the year's done, the quarter's done, and you go, here's the situation. Proactive communication with your accountant can really make or break, in my opinion, your financial situation.
So would you suggest that hearing from your accountant once or twice throughout the year is a symptom of maybe not a good accountant?
Yeah, I think so. And again, a part of that is the accountant's fault, if you will. But as a business owner, I would at least, try and communicate with them. Hey, I'd like to communicate with you. I'd like a better relationship so that I can be more on top of my business.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you're right. Like good accountants, it's like good tradies, they're never, they don't have any spare slots in their calendar, so to speak. But if you're already in with them and they're not proactively following you up and those sorts of things, I think that's a red flag. Yes, it is your responsibility to follow up with your accountant, but if you've made it clear, and this is the difference between expectations and reality all the time, like if the communication's there, if the expectation has been set that I want to hear from you on a monthly basis, if I don't call you on the month and you don't call me on the month, then we've got a problem, like one of us needs to constantly be chasing up. But if it's you doing the chasing of them constantly, and I see this all the time, right? Accountants, they go through, they're in this kind of abundance kind of place right now where there's so much work for them. They're like, whatever, loan brokers are the same at the moment, they don't have to get back to you, So understanding that is important. I mean, some of the other red flags that we talked about off line, Bride, was, the unexpected tax bills. I mean, that was a big thing for our client. But yeah, the lack of confidence is a huge thing. So, I mean, in contrast to those, like if you've seen those red flags, I mean, what I'd love, I always ask people, because there'll be people listening to this going, oh shit, yeah, I don't have a good relationship with the accountant. I only hear from them once or twice a year, and usually it's because I've chased them up to get my tax done, or I've got a huge tax bill and I wasn't expecting that. It's come from nowhere. Then my question becomes, in contrast, how much difference would your business be if you had confidence in your numbers? I mean, we obviously take people through knowing their numbers so they can have those discussions with their accountants, but how much better would you feel in yourself? Because I know for me, when I'm across the numbers and I know where all the money's at, it's just this, things can be tight, but when I know where everything's happening, where everything is, I can take comfort in that, knowing that, yeah, there might be a big tax bill going to come because we've invoiced for a huge job, but I also know the money's in the door and those sorts of things. So I can kind of relax. How much higher do you think you would show up in your business? How much better would you serve your existing clients if you weren't freaked out about your cash flow and your money and your accountant, Because I think the big thing to remember with accountants, right, is they're very heavy on compliance, right? They have to be. They're regulated by the ATO, the Financial Ombudsman, different governing bodies, those sorts of things. And that's, I think, what frustrates me a lot about accountants is they're very focused on that because they have to be, and rightfully so. But there's got to be this fine line that I think they can walk where they're compliant, but they're also looking after their their clients, and they're helping them make decisions like right now, until you get to X amount of dollars, you want to be in cash reporting a basis. Once you're into multi-millions of dollars, you can probably afford to move to accrual and it manages your cash flow a bit better. But until you've kind of built that skill set initially, I think accountants should be advising their clients to be on cash. See, that was very diplomatic. I said put it on the accountants to advise their clients. So if you're an accountant listening and you want to fight me on that, let me know. Like I said, we've got some amazing friend accountants who, their advice is to put yourself on cash reporting until such a time where you've got a war chest and you can build that stuff up so you don't get those big ebbs and flows. But I would love to know, Brian, you've seen good accounting, you've seen bad accounting. What can we give the listeners today? What are the sorts of questions that they can be asking themselves first and foremost? But then what are the questions they can be asking their accountant to know that they're going to be a good fit and that they're actually a forward-thinking accountant? Because that's the thing, these accountants stuck in this abundance mindset, thinking that the work's never going to run out, right? Because it always does, People will start to tighten their belts and go, shit, I can't afford to pay an accountant $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year. I need to do my own in-house accounting, right? So accountants need to start thinking a little bit outside of the box. How do we add more value to our clients? How do we make this a no-brainer where they don't start taking the law of accounting into their own hands? I know, there's been times where I've just been like, you know what, I'm done with you guys, but I'm waffling a little bit. Love to know from you, Brian. What sort of questions would you ask an accountant? What sort of questions would you ask yourself?
Right. That's a good point. I think in the first place is to ask them questions. We spoke about it. You want to interview an accountant before you take them on, or even if they're an existing accountant I would still have a meeting with them and say, hey, here's the direction I want to take my business, or I've taken on a coaching company and here's my goals, or if you're not having the discussion with an accountant about your goals and your business goals, not just your tax minimization or, compliance related goals. Again, if you see
everyone's only got one goal, Brian, minimize tax to zero. Sorry, I interrupt.
It's all good. You should really be involving someone like that in your discussion. So asking questions about, hey, this is my plan. What are your thoughts? And then the discussion should kind of, come off of that. And if from that discussion you're not comfortable or you don't think that you can sense, do they actually know what they're talking about? Are they, on board with what I'm talking about? Or, sometimes there's a disconnect. And those are the sorts of things I think you'd want to kind of flesh out a little bit to decipher whether or not A, you need to continue, or B, you need to find a new person, or C, continue with this person, but get them on board to where you want to have that relationship with. So questions around those. And I guess, questions around, other than what you're doing for me at the moment, where else could you add value to my business? Questions along those.
That's a really good point, actually, because I know that there's some accounting firms out there that do offer some additional services in and around, invoice management, chasing up clients and being the bad guy. So you can go and be the good guy and generate all the work and do the invoicing. But then when it comes to following it up, they've got some bookkeeping services, they've got some data management services, those sorts of things. So, if that's a problem for you, I think that it's worth having those discussions. But the questions for me, they've always got to start internally, do I have a good relationship? And I ask, I say this to people all the time, fire everybody mentally at least once a year, yes, Brian, I've fired you mentally before. And then get to the point, ask yourself, would I rehire them? And luckily for you, Brian, the answer is yes. So, but it's the same for the whole team, right? And the team, like you said, it extends to those external consultants and specialists and contractors and whatever they are, do you have a good relationship with them? Do they fill you with confidence? Do I feel like they're part of my team and they actually care about me and my business? If the answer is yes, then you can get to those external questions. What else can you do? Do you feel like, ask them out, feel them out, ask them out. Maybe don't ask them out, but feel them out, ask them the questions about, do you feel like we meet often enough? how else can we strengthen this relationship, So, but yeah, I mean, if you're on cash or accrual, I think that's a really good place to start. Contact your accountant and ask them why. Why am I on cash? Why am I on accrual? Whatever it may be. And that's a really good place to start getting for a feel for how helpful they are. If they're just trying to fob you off and sort of say, oh, that's just the way we do it, then it might be time to start looking for a new accountant. So I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. Brian, have you got anything else you want to add before we wind this episode up?
Not really, mate. I think, it's other than like, I know that a lot of you who are listening are probably who have an accountant that they have used, have possibly thought about moving to someone else, but just don't like the change. Honestly, you don't necessarily have to change someone, but I think just open up the conversations, ask the questions like Adam was suggesting, like even just ask them like, am I on accrual or a cash account? What's the difference? And why am I doing it that way? The more you can ask and open up the conversation, because a lot of things that happen with your accountant is just because that's how they do it, or that's how it's easier or whatever. Just open up the conversations and see where that leads to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think ask your accountant to explain things that you don't understand.
Yeah.
If they're prepared to teach you and share that knowledge with you, then they're probably a good accountant. It's a good sign, right? Because they want to help you. They want to help you understand. I know some of the best relationships that I've built with clients over the years are the ones that have asked me questions and I've taken the time to explain with them. It builds that trust. And accounting, if you're an accountant listening to this, this is one thing that you can do with your clients to really strengthen the relationships, teach them, explain to them. You're not going to become redundant if you do that. If anything, you're going to firm up the relationship and become the authority because you're the source of knowledge. They go to you for that. So there's some really valid points in there, some amazing things. I thought I was going to get a lot more ranty than I did because I've seen some terrible accounting lead to some terrible outcomes in business. And look, it's not always the accountant's whole and sole fault. It's usually a symptom of a lot of problems within the business. But, certainly some good discussions to be had. But we'll wrap it up there now. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you have enjoyed today's Tradie Business School podcast, please like and subscribe, hit the notification icon and share it with an accountant if you know one. Share it with somebody who might need some help with accounting. And if you need some help yourself, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at hello@tradiebusinessschool.com. And either myself or Brian or one of the team we'll reach out. We'll have a chat to you, see if we can help you with that. I know Brian loves numbers way more than I do, but at the end of the day, the numbers make the world go round. They make your business go round. So have those discussions with your accountants. Brian, thanks again for being part of the show. It's amazing to have you on here. I look forward to our next jam. It's always fun.
Yeah, cheers, Adam. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.